the 2014 Easter Circuit, the Intermountain Sectional. And today we have a very special guest, the author of Zulu Dreams, which you'll see over here in the book station, and a former tennis parent and college athlete at UNLV, Richie Mahlangu. Richie's story is fascinating and has captured the attention of national media. A story about apartheid South Africa and how a young man battling racial injustice can use the sport of tennis, use his passion for academics to rise above the adversity and to come to America and within one generation help his children get scholarships or academic entrance into Harvard University and Georgetown University. Both Nicholas and Yannick Mahlangu were top nationally ranked players. They've won more sectionals than I can remember. But more importantly, extremely intelligent, articulate, straight-A students. They gained admissions to the best colleges in the world. And we have a lot of parents out here today that are trying to do the very same thing that you did. So my question to you is, if you had to say that there's one thing to help a child become the best that they can be, to help them get into the college of their choice, to open up their future, what would it be?
Good afternoon. I don't know if there's only one thing, but I think the first thing the kids have to recognize they have to do is to do their homework. I think school comes first, and in my family that was always the case. We played tennis, but tennis was never necessarily a way to get away from the academics. We used tennis as a way as a stepping stone to open up the doors for academics. So I think the hard work on the court and hard work at school basically are the first two things they need to start thinking about.
So in your household, though, but let's admit it, academics came first, but tennis came pretty close second, didn't it? I mean, they spent a lot of hours studying, and they spent a good amount of hours training, didn't they?
Yeah, we basically, I pick up the kids. I work as a guidance counselor for the Clark School District. So I get done early about 2:30, and then I would pick them up from school. We would go straight to the court and train for about 2.5 hours to 3 hours. And they would go home and do homework for 3 to 4 hours every evening.
So now, a lot of parents would love their children to go and train for 2 to 3 hours and then come home and do homework for 2 to 3 hours. You know, how were you able to motivate them or to keep them aware of the benefits of doing that and doing it consistently? And did they do it consistently?
They did it consistently, but it was not always easy. I mean, the older the kids get, the kind of more retaliation you're going to find. Fortunately, in my household, the kids basically kind of understood at a very young age that they were playing tennis to go to college, and going to college was the #1 priority. Everything we did was based on them getting an opportunity to go to a better school. So I never really had issues about them doing their schoolwork. But since I train with them, and when you train with your own kids as a father or as a parent, it's not always easy. So my relationship with my kids is good, but I think maybe if I didn't scream and yell as much, it would be better.
So if you were to go back in time, you would have just toned down the volume, the same message, but a little more patient. I think all of us would probably say the same, right?
True, but you know, I was raised in Africa. We didn't really have I didn't have a lot of choices. And to me was about doing the best I can as a parent and as a father, you know, to open all the doors. Sometimes culturally things do not always work out the way they're supposed to in terms of how I maybe spoke to my kids or could tone my voice down. But I regret a little bit. Sometimes I don't. They had great opportunities. That's the question, you know. That's a question of life, I guess, whether, you know, you do one thing or the other. I don't think there's one way we can say it's a guarantee to do things. I think everybody's going to find their niche and do the best they can for their own families.
Now, you say you grew up in South Africa. Now, this was during apartheid. Can you give everybody here listening one simple example of what apartheid meant growing up as a young black person in South Africa. What was that like? And how is that different for these young people growing up in America?
Well, apartheid basically it's a Dutch word meaning apartness, segregation, because we were in South Africa we were colonized by the Dutch. So in South Africa it's pronounced apartheid, but in America it's pronounced apartheid. But basically what it means, as a kid growing up, I lived in a township, which what we call a ghetto in America. And everything basically was segregated. I went to all black schools, all my teachers were black. The buses that we rode were segregated, the hospitals, restaurants, basically everything was segregated. And when you were in a city working after a certain amount of time, you had to get out of the city. It was illegal for blacks to be in the city after a certain amount of time. So everything basically just like it was during the 60s here. The only difference between slavery and apartheid is that blacks in South Africa were not sold, and they were paid a little bit of money for whatever work they did. But basically it's the same concept of a country colonizing another country and basically abusing the natives for their own financial benefit.
So when you were growing up in apartheid South Africa under those circumstances, did you know any better? Did you have a dream about breaking free of those constraints? What did you do about it? How did you do it? How did you get to America?
As a 10-year-old boy, basically, there's 5 kids in my family. I'm the youngest out of the 5. There's 3 girls, my brother and I. As a 10-year-old boy, I had this dream that I wanted to escape apartheid and come to America so I can educate myself and go to college, so I could go back and rescue my family. And of course, as a young boy, when you tell people this type of a story, everybody laughs at you, think you're crazy. And I happened to be lucky to be playing against the wall with a broken tennis racket. The racket had no strings and barefooted. And a white man drove by my township and happened to stop and see me play. And he decided to make a tennis player out of me. He gave me free tennis lessons. I would help him pick up balls for all the white kids he was coaching. And then I would get half an hour of lessons after. But the dream basically, as a young boy, was always there. I always had the feeling that I basically could overcome whatever I needed to overcome to accomplish whatever my dream was.
So were you getting an education in South Africa?
I was actually, I was in school, but I was in black schools. And again, to describe a little bit of the difference, the education system that we had provided for the blacks is very different from the white education. Blacks had to pay to go to school in South Africa, whereas the whites didn't. We have 4 nationalities of whites, Indians, blacks, and coloreds, which is more like mulatto here. All these other races, the education was paid for by the government, but the blacks had to pay for their own education to go to school.
And this person came, they gave you rackets, they helped you, they gave you lessons, you worked for it, you earned it, and somehow you got to America. How did that tennis open the door?
What actually happened was, after about 2 years, Mr. Gray, the guy that coached me, went to a white tennis club in South Africa and asked if I could be a member there. So they allowed me to be a member. I played there every Saturday. I was only allowed to come Saturdays. And there was a man who was on vacation in South Africa who was originally a South African. And he heard my story and decided to sponsor me to go to Europe. So I went to Austria. He had a tennis camp in Austria. And I coached there for him for about a year and a half. And coincidentally, there's a guy who had graduated from UNLV who was on vacation in Austria, who basically came to this tennis club and I ended up playing with him. And he contacted Mr. Craig Weacher, who's the pro here in town. Craig was the head pro at UNLV at the time, and that's how I got recruited.
So you got recruited to come to UNLV on a scholarship to play Division I NCAA tennis. When you found out that you were going to fulfill that dream to come to America after all of those trials and tribulations, what was that experience like? Did you realize the change that was happening?
At the time, I was just too young to start with. I was about 21. I was 21, but I was still very naive. I did not really understand to what magnitude that meant. And of course, when I came here, I realized how much opportunity I had, and basically all what I had to do is to show up and practice as hard as I could, and go to class, and I was going to have my education paid for. So I realized that the opportunities that America could actually provide that basically do not exist anywhere in the world, because there is no other country in the world where you can go to college and play sport and have your school paid for because you're an athlete.
And here you are, you got your undergraduate degree, you played for Craig Richard at UNLV, who kind of found you and plucked you out of South Africa, and you then got your master's degree, isn't that correct?
I got my master's degree in educational psychology, which basically allows me to be a guidance counselor in the Clapham School District. Originally, I wanted to do marriage and family counseling, but I wanted to make sure that I had time for my kids in terms of training and making sure they needed to go to tournaments. And I switched to school to guidance counseling, which is basically what I do now.
Now, so then you get married. You've got 2 boys, Nicholas and Yana. Tell us the vision. You know, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, I'm going to make a tennis player, I'm going to make a student out of these kids and get them to Harvard and Georgetown? Was that your original goal?
Well, I didn't know about Georgetown and Harvard necessarily specifically, but I mean, I know what the schools were, and I had a decent idea what you need to do to get in there. But this is one part I feel guilty of about my kids, because my kids never really had a lot of choices. You know, I didn't actually ask them, do you feel like playing tennis today? Or they say, well, maybe, maybe not. You know, we went to the course and trained. So they kind of had a job at 4 and 6 years old that they want to play to go to these schools. And when I started doing the at graduate school, understanding the entrances, how to get into colleges, and using sport and also but also remembering the opportunities that sport opened for me, it was very clear to me what I needed to do to get them where they need to go.
Now, along the way, you know, that's a 15-year, 20-year journey. Tell us a little bit about that story. How did you get that journey started? Who helped you along the way? And how do you think it's turned out?
Well, there's actually a lot of people who have been involved in my life because this thing to do it alone is not that easy. I took care of the business, you know, on the court with the boys. And so the boys started playing in the mountain tennis. I got to know some people here who invited me to a lot of tournaments. And then of course I went into you guys, the Muddy Hennessy Foundation that basically financed my kids' entrance fees to all the tournaments for the last 5 years, which was a big help because I'm basically divorced and I'm, as a single parent, responsible for all their tennis finances. So that was a big help with your foundation to pay for my kids' entrances, and of course often I didn't have enough money to pay the high prices of the hotels, and the Muddy Hennessy Foundation basically financed a lot of that. There's another gentleman here in town called Mason Melmeth. He also sponsored my kids, but a lot of it is just hard work and asking for help from people, which originally at the beginning I had a hard time doing. But a lot of people, as they saw the kids, you know, having a decent amount of success, they would call me and basically be willing to do the best they can to help me achieve our dream. And the boys, they're in college. Nicholas is finishing his second year at Harvard. He's went and applied for an internship. He got an internship this summer with Microsoft, which is his first job. Yannick is at Georgetown, struggling a little bit to adjust to the college life. He went there when he was 17. And you know, hopefully he can figure it out. But I'm grateful to be here at this time with what has happened.
Now, I want all the children here to pay attention to what I'm about to say. So if I can get some silence here for a second. I've been involved in junior tennis for about 13 years, 12, 13 years, and you know, try to figure out the formula for success. And I would say 50 to 70% minimum comes from the parents. 50 to 70% minimum. And then the other, as they get older, the percentage increases that it comes from the child. And I hope that all the children here are extremely grateful to their parents and to their mentors and their coaches and the people that rally behind them. Because when they say no, or they request something better of you, they're actually trying to make you a happy, successful person. And I think there were times when your boys, you know, probably thought that your no's or your requests of them to be better, you know, weren't fair. But I was talking to Nicholas the other day, and he's at Harvard. I said, "Do you have any regrets?" He goes, "No, I'm happy as can be." So it's interesting that someone like you, who got a master's degree, could go and spend 80 hours a week building your own business and putting together a fortune, but instead you put that time into your children so they can become your fortune. And I think that's what's remarkable about tennis parents, a lot of them. So give me one more thing that these parents can take away, that if you could go back in time and change anything, forget about the things you did well, what would you do better?
I don't know. I'm actually pretty okay with what I did with my kids. They still talk to me once in a while. I get a text, or I send one, and I get one maybe in 2 or 3 days. The training was tough. The boys always knew that. One of the things that one of my kids said when he was interviewed in one of the interviews, he said the training was sometimes unbearable with my dad. And I said to him, you know, this is how I believe how hard you have to train, because I can guarantee you there is no sport in the world where you're going to be the best you can be to beat everybody else if you don't train hard. It just doesn't happen. And I was lucky enough to have traveled a bit in the tennis circuit with a professional player. I understood what it takes, you know, to get to that level. And you know, I didn't try to be too emotional about the whole thing. In terms of feeling sorry for them when, you know, things didn't go that well. But I just think the important thing that the parents have to make the choice if, you know, they're going to be their friends with their kids or they're going to be parents. And I just basically chose to be a parent. There's a lot of times where I would drive to a tournament with the kids and they just sit in the back of the car and not talk, you know, and except they want food or go to the bathroom. But as they get older, things change a little bit. But I've had the same thing from parents who maybe weren't as hard to their kids. That, well, we get the same thing. They sit in the car, they got their earphones on, they listen to the music. But I just think parents just gotta keep doing what they believe they should be doing with their kids. If they're gonna spend more time studying to push them, I think they should. But I can't say there's one way to do it.
Now, a lot of these parents are probably thinking, how did you get them into Harvard? How did you get them into Georgetown? How did all that come about? Did your boys research colleges? Did they explain the process a little bit?
Well, basically, when the kids become juniors, when the recruiting time comes, we have these national tournaments that the kids have to go to. And of course, it's important if they have high ranking, because if they rank high, the coaches, they get to know who they are, they get to see them. Unfortunately for me, I knew a good amount of people in the tennis world, but also in the college world. So as the boys got older, I basically would call the coaches and tell them who I was, and send the transcripts to the coaches, because that's the first thing they want to see. They want to see if the kids can academically handle the load of school while they're playing tennis. So I, you know, picked up maybe 10 schools. I'd send the information, made appointments to see these coaches at tournaments. That's how the whole process started. But basically, I think it's important for the parents to work with coaches, because a lot of coaches play college tennis or working with foundations that know the process of getting to college, so the parents aren't basically running into walls. Sometimes it's easier when a coach calls another coach from college than a parent, because sometimes, you know, coaches believe we're gonna say anything we want to say about our kids. We all think our kids are great, but if a coach calls, I think it's always a bit different. So I think it's important for the parents to understand that they need to work closely with the coaches that coaches their kids to make that jump into the college entrance.
And I think a good point is, even though you were divorced, your ex-wife, and you worked together because you had a single goal of making these kids the best they could be. And she did a great job, from what I recall, of really helping them focus on their academics. And you both agreed that that was important, and you really honed in on the athletics. And even though you weren't in the same house, you were in the same goal, and you achieved, you know, the same kind of triumph. Don't you agree?
Yeah, well, fortunately, that part of the divorce worked very well, because regardless of our differences, you know, with other things, the goal of raising the kids to try and get them the education was always our #1 goal. So there was basically no questions about what is it we're trying to do with the kids. And she spent most of the time with them because she had them 4 days a week and I had them on the weekends. And that was also part of making sure that they, you know, kind of a stable environment to get their academics done. So that way it worked better. And of course, when you know things go wrong a little bit, the kids, you could always try and play the parents, you know, against each other. And we were lucky that did not happen because we were always kind of on the same page about their school and their tennis.
All right, and I want to get everybody's attention real quick one more time, especially if you're in middle school and high school. I'm going to make a bold statement. If Yannick and Nicholas did not have straight A's, and if they weren't focused on their academics, there is no chance they would be at Harvard and Georgetown right now. Is that correct?
There is absolutely no chance. At Harvard University, they have 15,000 applicants their freshman year, and they only take 1,300. The good news for athletes is, for example, the application process starts in January. As an athlete, my son's application was processed in November. Because if you have a coach at a university that basically wants you to come into their school, you basically taken out of the whole pile and you put on a separate pile where the athletes come in. So basically, to answer your question, same thing for Yannick. If the academics were not the first thing, and then the tennis, there is no way they'd be in the schools.
And then we'll close, before we take a couple questions, I'm going to close with this statement or question. What's more valuable, a degree from Harvard and Georgetown, or being 100 in the world as an athlete? Just from a financial standpoint, what do you think is more